From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. The results are in. Voters in Cuba have approved the country's new constitution. On Sunday, more than 7 million people cast their ballots out of the 8 million registered voters. And election officials say the new constitution passed with more than 85% support. These are the first major changes to Cuba's current constitution, which was adopted in 1976. The new constitution ushers in hundreds of changes. It changes the definitions of marriage and private property. It also limits presidential terms to 2 5-year terms and reintroduces the post of prime minister. And the United States has announced new sanctions against Venezuela's government. The U.S. Treasury Department imposed the penalties on 4 state governors allied with President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. 3 of governors oversee some of the biggest ports in the country. The U.S. sanctions already in place have cost the country and its people tens of billions of dollars. This comes after the Lima Group meeting between the U.S. and its allies in the Lima Group. The Venezuelan opposition lawmaker and self-proclaimed President Juan Guaidó joined U.S. Vice President Mike Pence for the meeting. Pence called for more diplomatic isolation of Venezuela.
Muy buenos días.
The United States calls on every freedom-loving nation in this hemisphere, including Mexico, Uruguay, and the nations of the Eastern Caribbean, to join with us in recognizing interim President Juan Guaidó and his government, and join us by stepping forward to support the Venezuelan people's struggle to reclaim their libertad.
Venezuela Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza, during an interview on Democracy Now!, criticized Juan Guaidó for continuing to support foreign intervention in Venezuela.
In any case, he's going to meet with his boss, with Mr. Pence, and he's going to ask Mr. Pence for a military intervention in Venezuela. He already said it, It's sad, but it's also insane. You cannot believe or tell the people that you are the president, so-called president of your country, and ask for a foreign intervention against your people, against your family, against your friends. No, because bombs will not differentiate who's Chavista and who's not Chavista. So I believe I can almost not believe when I hear these people calling for these things.
Arreaza also spoke about the ongoing economic war against Venezuela.
The main reason why our economy has trouble is because of the international attack, and specifically this blockade and sanctions from the U.S. If we didn't have those sanctions and that blockade, we could manage our economy. If we had the $30 billion that this blockade has costed over 1 year and a half, and $15 billion that our company Citgo represents as a value of the assets, things would be very different. So we have to understand this. This blockade is being translated into the suffering of many Venezuelans, and this has to be stopped.
And social movements gathered outside the meeting in Bogota to oppose any moves towards war. They want a negotiated solution to the situation in Venezuela. The Lima Group is meeting after the failure of attempts to force so-called humanitarian aid across the border over the weekend. President Evo Morales of Bolivia has asked the Lima Group to avoid any military action in Venezuela. On Twitter, Morales said, "Respecting our differences as democratically elected leaders, I ask you to seek a solution through dialogue to save lives and avoid war that will bring destruction to our Latin America." And former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva sent a letter calling on the people in his country to reject U.S. intervention in the region. He called on the people to fight for their sovereignty. He also referred to the situation in Venezuela, saying the sanctions imposed by the U.S. are harming the people. Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez has criticized the Lima Group via Twitter. He says, quote, if the so-called Lima Group does not modify the draft declaration imposed by the U.S. and does not oppose a U.S. military action against Venezuela, it will assume a serious historical responsibility as an accomplice of a new imperialist war in our America. And the European Union is once again urging countries to avoid any military intervention in Venezuela.
Contact has been established, but nevertheless the position of the European Union in this context is very clear. We must avoid any military intervention.
Both the U.S. Vice President and the leaders of the Lima Group, along with much of the world's media, accuse Venezuela government of burning aid trucks and attacking their own people. But our own correspondent on the border reports that what really happened at the weekend was somewhat different.
The Simón Bolívar Bridge between Venezuela and Colombia. Along with the Santander Bridge at Ureña, it's one of two main border crossings. Both were chosen as sites for an epic day, a sort of checkmate against the Bolivarian Revolution in just one day, thanks to the miraculous humanitarian aid from the United States. Right at the start of the day, a false flag operation would be an excellent way to start the coup d'etat. A spectacular escape by Venezuelan soldiers in armored cars to trigger a mass desertion. But it ended badly. They began a humanitarian day with an act of terror. From there, it continued downhill. On the Santander Bridge, the remains of two trucks supposedly carrying the famous boxes of aid. One was set on fire, the other pillaged. The next day, the Colombian president knew exactly who was responsible.
They burned food and medicine. This is a barbarian act, clearly in violation of international law. I think the international community saw much more clearly yesterday what Venezuelans have been suffering for years.
Of course, it couldn't be these cheery volunteers who were to blame. They just happened to be preparing and throwing dozens of Molotov cocktails that set the same truck alight over and over again. They were the picture of love and solidarity. Clearly, the plan failed. Neither the trucks nor the liberators crossed into Venezuela, but for more than 12 hours, the bridge was no man's land, with none of the usual customs or immigration officials to be seen. Only one person could be to blame.
It is Maduro who has caused this. He is the only one responsible.
Maduro must have been to blame too for what happened on the Simón Bolívar Bridge throughout Saturday morning. Venezuelan opposition supporters spent hours in face-to-face exchanges with the Bolivarian police's front line of defense. They told them about their suffering mothers and children and the fires of hell that awaited them at the International Criminal Court. Maybe they were hoping for a Hollywood finale where the troops dropped their arms and embraced their foes. Since that didn't happen, the opposition lawmaker, José Olivares, in charge of the operation, took the bull by the horns. With the air of a man who knows what's needed, surrounded by his lieutenants, he led a small march straight towards the cordon of young policemen and women, a call for harmony laden with threats.
Behind us are thousands of people, but above all trucks loaded with aid. The only thing I can tell you, for certain, with all the respect and affection of a fellow Venezuelan, is that we are determined to get through. We will pass.
At 9:30, we are going to organize a human chain to carry the humanitarian aid into Venezuela. The first line is made up of Bolivarian police. They're not the army or the National Guard, so they know we are going to get through with the aid.
After that, Olivares disappeared, along with his lieutenants in blue jackets with emblems in English. Back came the poor foot soldiers. It was time. The young police officers didn't drop their shields, and a single tear gas bomb sent the protesters running. The calls for love and peace turned into stones and Molotov cocktails for several hours. The Colombian police always willing to lend a hand. On the Venezuelan side, Civilians and police joined in a combined defense, with the music of Ali Primera in the background. The day ended with lawmaker Olivares on the back of a truck, more humble now, ordering a retreat. The epic had come to an end.
The battle isn't worth it anymore. We need to look after our boys, take care of our people, and speak to them.
Dawn broke on Sunday with the bridges occupied by police. Venezuela had broken off diplomatic relations with Colombia. The border was closed on both sides. Did this mean peace? On the bridges, yes. But beneath, it was still no man's land, where Duque's protégés knew exactly what they wanted.
As soon as our guys get through and they start seizing the Venezuelan soldiers' weapons, they have to kill the soldiers. We cannot continue just throwing stones at them. They have to understand what the mission is about, and they have to hand the weapons to the new government. They must not lose those weapons.
North Americans, Brazilians, Colombians, we need an army to help us there in Venezuela. They have to liquidate the armed forces. It will be 2 or 3 days of war, but then we will be done with it.
If the warnings of war come true, these will not be the soldiers in the next battle for Venezuela's independence and sovereignty.
We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. And delegates from more than 200 social organizations are gathering in Caracas, Venezuela to show their support for the government of Nicolás Maduro and the Venezuelan people. Our correspondent Paola Fernandez has more.
We are the International People's Assembly. More than 200 social organizations are participating in this event, coming from around the world, to show their support for the people of Venezuela. Present are delegates from 80 different countries who are also sharing their struggle in their own territories. Joining us to talk more about this is one of the representatives from the Brazil's Landless movement. Your movement is fighting for justice regarding the land and the rights of the people to defend their land. Can you talk about the election of Jair Bolsonaro and what your movement thinks about what is happening in Venezuela?
Thanks for having me. In Brazil, we lost an election that was manipulated. The judiciary prevented former President Lula da Silva from running without any real reasons. There was also a lot of fake news during the campaign season. Under the directions of the United States, and that is how far-right Bolsonaro was elected. His government consists of 3 different groups that do not work together, but are all under the direction of Washington. And for that, Brazil has become a colony of the U.S. in terms of external affairs, and also to take over our resources. Now using that, the U.S. wants to oust the government of Venezuela by using Brazil. But the 3 government groups have no unit at all, and the military knows that. This is not viable. That an intervention is not supported by the people. This is why it is the vice president, a former general, who is attending the Lima Group meeting in Bogota. Bolsonaro wants the war.
Thank you so much for joining us. We will continue our coverage here at the People's Assembly, where more than 200 social organizations from around the world are gathering to support Venezuela and to share their personal struggle in their territory.
The African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of States is calling on the Haitian police to exercise maximum restraint in responding to any provocation by protesters. In a statement, ACP Secretary General Dr. Patrick Gomez condemned the perpetration of the violence and loss of life. The diplomat is urging all parties to refrain from any further action that could exacerbate the situation.
A slogan or a theme.
In Jamaica, after opposition senators walk out of the Senate, the bill that will lead to the government's repurchase of the 49% stake in Petrojam was approved. The leader of the government business in the Senate, Kamina Johnson-Smith, explained why the action is important.
like many other countries, rely on a vast supply of energy in order to keep everything going, literally everything, to fuel our homes, our businesses, buses, taxis, communication, factories, businesses, our hospitals, healthcare centers. The ability to flick a switch and have the light come on. This is the importance of Petrojam to Jamaica. They're responsible for approximately 80% of Jamaica's market supply. So if Petrojam is insecure, Jamaica is insecure.
Caribbean countries have been warned that rainfall over the next 3 months may be less than usual in some islands. The Caribbean Med Institute says with weak El Niño conditions forecasted, the chances of drought, heat waves, and recurrent dry spells are increased, and this could spark wildfires. A potential late start to the wet season, particularly in Belize and the southernmost islands, may produce warmer temperatures.
In addition to battling with very little rain.
On Sunday, following the arrival of 2 humanitarian trucks in Brazil that failed to reach Venezuela, violent clashes broke out at the border between supporters of Venezuela's political opposition and the army. More about this in the following report.
On Sunday, 2 trucks carrying the so-called humanitarian aid from the U.S. failed to reach 30 million Venezuelans, according to the narrative of the mainstream media. The 2 trucks ended up in a military base in Brazil, where they remained for the rest of the day. Brazilians were told that a huge cargo of supplies was arriving, but were left baffled by the seemingly small amount.
It's too little. It's just 2 trucks of humanitarian aid. It's suspicious for being so little. If there were 20 or 30 trucks at least, it would be worth all this fuss. But this just doesn't make sense. It's just my opinion as a Brazilian worker and a citizen of Roraima, who has been impacted by the situation.
After the arrival, violent clashes broke out as supporters of the opposition from the Brazilian side of the border attacked Venezuelan security forces. They started burning tires next to a PDVSA gas station, which could have caused a huge explosion. They destroyed a military detachment and threw stones at the Venezuelan army, all in front of the international press. Eventually, the Venezuelan army fired back with tear gas to disperse the violent crowd.
This
is vandalism. There's no reason why they should come to our country and do this.
I don't see why they are doing this. It's vandalism. What are people going to think about us? We don't want this. It's not going to solve anything.
Hours after violence broke out, Brazilian security forces arrived at the border with reinforcements and ordered the protesters to leave. In the afternoon, members of the Brazilian and Venezuelan armies met at the border and agreed to work together to secure the area.
Time for a second break. More news in a minute. Welcome back. Arab and European leaders opened their first summit this Sunday in Egypt. The European Union and Arab League countries are seeking to bolster cooperation between the 2 regions. According to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the 2-day summit shows that, quote, what brings together to the 2 regions exceeds immeasurably what divides them. Our correspondent in Damascus, Hisham Wanous, gives us more details.
An Arab League and EU summit is taking place in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh. The summit was led by European Council President Donald Tusk and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. In a shared statement, they reinforced their commitment to nuclear non-proliferation in the Middle East and world peace. They also agreed that the fight against terrorism is still an important issue, and one way to solve it is to cut the financial resources of terrorists. The need to defend the sovereignty of Syria, Libya, and Yemen was also discussed with both parties, agreeing to support the efforts of the UN to achieve a peaceful solution. The Arab League will aim to broker political stability in Syria. The EU stated that Iran and Saudi Arabia's rivalry is fueling political instability in the region. In its defense, Saudi Arabia insisted on continuing its efforts to roll back Iranian influence. The next meeting will be held in Brussels in 2020.
President Muhammadu Buhari has taken an early lead in Nigeria's election. He has claimed victories in 2 states where results have been announced so far. Full and final results are expected to be released on Tuesday or early Wednesday. The Commission has warned against disseminating unverified election results. Meanwhile, the African Union has said Nigeria's election took place in a generally peaceful environment, despite isolated incidents of violence. However, civil society groups are reporting the election was characterized by widespread violence in a number of states. As many as 39 people are reported to have died in violent crashes between rival supporters on Saturday.
The 2019 elections took place in a generally peaceful environment. The mission notes the destruction of election materials, including over 4,000 smart card readers, ballot boxes, and voter registers in certain parts of the country, impacted on the timely conduct of the elections.
Zimbabwean opposition leader Nelson Chamisa refused to take part in the ongoing dialogues called on by President Emerson Mnangagwa. We spoke with Gibson Nyengatsino, a journalist and political analyst from Zimbabwe. Here is what he had to say.
Emerson Mnangagwa has invited opposition political parties to a national dialogue after demonstrations and violent protests last month destroyed property worth thousands of US dollars. But now the main opposition political party led by advocate Nelson Chamisa has declined the gesture to a national dialogue, saying there is need to address the issue of legitimacy as resulting from July 30 presidential elections. The opposition figure alleges that he won the election and the Constitutional Court ruling was just a move to rig the election in favor of the incumbent. And now he has declined to attend the talks or the national dialogue. However, the church community and other opposition political parties have said they are going on with the dialogue since it is a good intention for the development of the country and also for lowering foreign investors who are keen to see a peaceful and stable environment. The government is prioritizing the economy over politics as enunciated by the current president, who said there is need for all Zimbabweans to join hands as they move forward to try and resuscitate and rebuild an economy that has seen a recurrence of sanctions and other renewed embargoes by the United States of America, led by its European Union allies.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been criticized by AIPAC, the largest U.S. pro-Israeli lobby, over an election alliance with far-right party loyal to the policies of the late anti-Arab rabbi Meir Kahane. Netanyahu engineered the deal between the Jewish Power and another ultranationalist faction, Jewish Home, on Wednesday. Netanyahu has defended the merger as a way to improve his chances of forming a right-wing governing coalition led by his party to serve for a fifth term in office.
We usually do not interfere in elections. However, in this case, our voice needs to be heard. We care about Israel. We love Israel. Israel is a strong, vibrant democracy, a party which is based on racist, Kahanist values, we think should not be a part of the Israeli government. However, we understand that it's up to the Elections Committee to decide who will be a part of that government or not. We're not intervening, we're merely stating our voice, a voice of the Jewish diaspora, the biggest Jewish diaspora outside of Israel.
The UK's Labour Party has announced it will support a second referendum on Brexit. Leader Jeremy Corbyn said a second referendum will prevent a damaging Tory Brexit being forced on the country. Corbyn will also table an amendment to the government's Brexit motion, setting out 5 demands to Prime Minister Theresa May as conditions for the Labour Party's support of a Brexit deal, including a permanent customs union. And with this story, we come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.